All right. So now we'll discuss aspects of how the ritual practices were elaborated in the Puranic traditions. As we said, that there is assimilation happening, but the assimilation is not one way. It's not as if only the Puranic texts are including all kinds of local practices and local traditions. Uh, Even as the texts seek to imbibe different cults and practices, they also attempt to extend the scope of their influence to uh, newer and other regions and different categories. And of course, when they're extending their ideas and their notions, they are also expanding their social base, and along with that comes an expansion in the patronage that they are getting. And so on one hand they're including local and regional practices, but also introducing practices like the Varna Ashram Dharma, the notion of the Purusharthas, and the significance of Brahmanas as mediators, as the medium for carrying out ritual activities to different areas. So, in that sense, there is a rationalization of practices, ritual rites, and dharmic practices, and also their elaboration. And so you have new or more elaborate ways of introducing the old one, of continuing the old ones itself. So you have traditions related to rites and rituals, shraddh, dan, puja, jap, tap, tirtha, and the understanding that particular places, the spatiality of places, tirthas and sthans, and even uh, going towards the construction of temples, which marks a major departure from earlier emphasis on fire or Homa rituals in Vedic sacrifices. So, in that sense, there are these new forms of worship which are being included in the Purans, and these new and diversive forms of expression of religiosity can be seen in the Vrat Kathas, and not only the Vrat Kathas, but the 16 forms of worship of the different of idols and the deity, and particularly the promotion of Tirtha worship, the visit to Tirthas. So there is this attempt to expand spatially and geographically in a lateral manner, but also more intensive manner where you include different kinds of ways in which religiosity is to be expressed. And there is an elaboration on the worship and the making of idols, the need to embody the deity embody the deity in a form and worship its parts individually. So not only the deity is worshipped, but different parts of the deity, what is known as the Anga Puja. And so the deity is worshipped the various in various ways, which includes Anga Puja as well as in a composite manner. And all these seem to show a way in which there is a certain deviation from the earlier forms of worship. The texts, in that sense, are incorporating diverse social categories and also have these varied forms of worship and religious observances, but they're also now tapping into new resource bases and attempting to garner support from widening social categories. So, in that sense, they also hold the possibilities of social mobility, because if you are including new categories and constantly changing the dynamics of the communities and the manner in which categories are being formed, that itself allows for possibilities of social mobility. There is also expanded resource base along with the social base, so they are able to extend their ways of resource mobilization, and especially amongst those groups which had earlier not been recognized as potential sources of resources, especially women, and that would be upper class and upper women of the upper categories, and also what are seen as the different the shudras, or from other ways they are also being accepted as patrons. So in that sense, the assimilativeness of the Purans is directed towards the inclusion of new groups and areas. And while this inclusion is taking place, they're also including their gods and their ritual observances. And it's accompanied with the introduction of Brahminical thought systems with to these new ideas, new people and places. So, in that sense, as I said, this initiative is not one sided, and social groups outside the Brahminical purview seem to have been able to get assimilated and integrate themselves into Brahminical traditions by latching on these Vanshavalis or the Puranic lineages, especially the upper categories, the ruling classes, who for whom also these Vanshavalis were allowing for assimilation in different ways. And then they would also patronize Puranic theistic cults, which assimilated their own local gods and goddesses. And so, on one hand, because of that, they lose their sacred, local flavor and get included in the Puranic pilgrimage and deities list. So, this assimilation, classification, and sortation aims towards reaching out. So, in that sense, as I told you, geographically, they're reaching out in a spatial manner through the inclusion of areas um, in this entire region, what is called the Aryavrat, and then was being called the Jambudvipa, through the delineation of the tirthas. They're also expanding demographically through the inclusion of new regions and categories, and also expanding in a linguistic manner, because the language of the Purans is reaching out to different regions by adopting the epic mythology genre, and that what is also known as the Itihas Puran tradition, and that is creating ways in which it is regions also coming with their own Itihas Puran traditions. So while there is an expanded notion of who could be included within one's own people, while this kind of assimilation is also taking place, there is also a clearer idea of the othering, and who is not a part of what they are. And so social categories are being identified, assimilated, sorted out, classified, and that is indicative of a rapidly changing social milieu. But along with that, there is also a clearer definition of who is the other. And some of these references can be seen in the terms that are used. For example, terms like the Malecha. Now, references to the Malecha reflect anxiety, and this is anxiety of conquest and political domination. So we get to know about Malecha kings, but also a socio-cultural uh, anxiety of being ideologically upstaged. And that othering can be seen in texts like the Vayu Puran, which mentions that this island is continually beset at its borders by the uncultured. So you are think of yourself as a superior culture and the others as uncultured, and that is what the Vayu Puran is trying to show. And it's not only the references to the Malechas, but also the divide between the Devas and the Daityas is carrying forward of that us and them kind of an ideology which is projected in the myths. And it needs this kind of deva datya divide, to my opinion, needs more careful analysis, because it seems to represent um, conflict between different categories. And so whether it is the idea of the Vishnu avatars, or the origins of the goddess, the Devi worship, or even my myths like the birth of Skanda, all of them are related to how they come to conquer evil, the others, the Daityas, and the need for divine intervention in conflicts between the Devas and the Daityas. So, in that sense, the Daityas also seem to be representing others who do not belong ideologically, but otherwise they're equals in every other way. They have long established dynastic rules, so they are like kings, um, and they have a lot of resources, so they are resourceful, and so there is need to engage with them. And there are many instances where there are references to Malech and Shudra kings and rulers, which shows, that there are these. It's not as if we're talking only when we talk about Malaysia and Shudra, we're talking only about the economically oppressed categories, but they are powerful people who have their own, communities and resources. And I'll just give you one quotation from the Matsya Mahapuran, and this is chapter 50.42, where the rishis are asking who are the future kings and who will be the rulers of the land. And, this is also a technique of the Purans, that they say everything in a prophetic manner, that this is going to happen. Whereas it must be something which they are seeing, or they are anxious about. So they say that they are the rishis ask Suta who are the rulers of the land and what will their names be and for how long will they rule. And Suta tells them that Vyas had said this, that in the Kali Yuga and the Manvantaras, the future kings will arise, and they will also include the Shatras, the Parashavas, the Shudras, the Pulindas, the Chulikas, the Yavanas, the Kevartas, Abhiras, and the Shabaras, and those with Malecha origins. So the fact that Malecha and Shudra dynasties are referred to and included shows that the Puran texts, on one hand, feel the need to include these in the ruling echelons, as they already had a considerable presence, and they are mentioned as part of the list. So it would seem as if there is some anxiety related to their rule, and the attempt is to understand or facilitate the acceptance of such rulers. So, this concern can be seen in many ways. And for example, in the Vishnu avatar, particularly the 10th avatar, which is going to come, what it says, that this would destroy the wicked and the Pashanda. Pashanda, usually a term used for those who've taken to Buddhism and other sects. So this would destroy the wicked and the Pashanda, and with a large army of Brahmanas, he, that is Kalki, who is the 10th avatar, will kill the Shudra kings And then with his army on the 28th of Kali Yuga, after purifying the Shudras, will cross the ocean where he will destroy the mixed castes, Varna Sankara, and fulfilling his mission, educate the people. So this passage, tells us a lot about how there will be a 10th avatar which will come. So the anxiety about uh, which will destroy wicked and the Pashanda and the Shudra kings and then purify the Shudra. So there is this notion that there is ability to, there is scope for social mobility, and the vehemence is not only against the Pashandas but also the mixed castes, Varna Sankara. And that, tells us about the ideology, because Manu has carried his abhorrence for Varna Sankara to great heights. And here again in the Puranic traditions, we have references to the mixed caste. And then this understanding that people will be educated. Educated with what? With Puranic ideology. So these kinds of passages, if you read them, tell us about the concerns related and the anxieties related to what is happening in society and how to deal with them. And in fact, if you continue reading the passage, it also says that how people enrage with each other, and this is, how they are conceptualizing Kali Yuga. They will kill each other to fulfill their destiny. People will become enraged and deluded, and people, it also goes on to say that men will be selling boiled rice in markets, Brahmins will sell the Vedas, women will earn their living by selling their hair. So, this concern that how Brahmins will have to sell the Vedas to earn a living, and how men will have to sell food in the markets, and women uh, selling their hair. It could be a reference to how they have to sell their virtue or whatever. And so, this is all kind of fear of what is going to happen in the Kali Yuga. And then it goes on to say that there will be trials, tribulations, and upheavals. And after having undergone all these troubles, all will be annihilated at the end of Kali Yuga, and Satyug will follow Kali Yuga. So this understanding of how the 10th incarnation will manifest itself is interesting, because here now the Deva Daitya conflict is not being mentioned, but the Brahman Shudra conflict is being mentioned. And this going so far as to say Brahmana armies will take on Shudra kings. And so, on one hand, Shudras are recognized as people who have royal status and can be purified. So, there is this rivalry of two equally powerful categories, and they also seem to have access to power and resources, and so that reflects the text's acceptance of Shudra kings. But the notion of Kali age, even the scholars like R.S. Sharma and B.N.S. Yadav and D.N. Jha have talked about the crisis of the Kali age and what it may be reflecting some kind of a social crisis. But actually, if you read what they're saying about the Kali age, rather than a generic crisis, it is more of a Brahminical crisis, a crisis related to patronage for the Brahmins. Because they have to sell the Vedas, and it seems to be more a crisis of patronage and donations, and how the Brahmins can continue to be relevant in such new political formulations. So, this reference to educating the people and to spreading their ideology and disseminating the ideology seems to be more of a anxiety related to how and the fact that they're talking against the Pashanda sects shows how are the Brahmins going to survive in this, because it seems as if all the other categories are doing okay, the Shudras are doing well, and so it's mainly a crisis of the Brahmins, and that is why they are reformulating their strategies by bringing in uh, more assimilative ideology in the Puranic traditions. So if we see the social context of the Puranic traditions, it is the fact that there are references to different types of social categories, but also that by referring to these social categories, Brahmins are, or the Puranic authors, they're not all it's not as if Brahmanas are a homogeneous category. So there are many category, there are many types of Brahmins themselves. So the Puranic authors are trying to explain those people who have power and control over resources, and then including them. And then when they say it is they are powerful because they conduct such and such a ritual, they are actually explaining already existing social hierarchization and saying that and saying that, oh, they are powerful because they conduct particular rituals or vrats. So even whether it's women or Shudras and all the other social categories, they are including them and saying that they should conduct these rituals. But the fact that they are including them shows that they are already existing classes or people who have resources. And so it is no wonder that kings, elite, uh, and to a limit extent, propertied upper class women have some degree of agency, because of which the Brahmins then say that they have this agency because they have performed, the Puranic rituals and all. So, in that sense, in the worldview of the Purans, it is rituals that give them power, while actually these powerful categories existed, and they tell us a little about the concerns that the Puranic authors have with regard to getting patronage from these powerful uh, groups, and how they include them into their uh, social understanding. So, if we try to understand social relations and power structures, a study of ritual observances in these Puranic traditions will help, because they help us understand which categories these Puranas are most, from which categories are they expecting patronage from the most. And these are the kings, women, in Shudras, the Vaishyagan, Kshatriyas. So they talk about who are the people who can give them dan. And that itself explains social relations and power structures, and it helps us identify the areas from where expectations of dan and patronage and support comes from, and that helps throw light on the manner in which wealth and property are concentrated in the society. So I'll end this section of this presentation. And in the next section, we'll take up a study or an understanding of rituals and the Vrata tradition in the Puranic traditions.